Welcome back to the broadcast, the last laps, and we discuss the tough times that we are seeing in schools, the level of unrest that has been witnessed, the indiscipline that is growing by the day, begging the question, what exactly is happening down there? Is it because students were away from schools for the longest of time? Is it because of the change of system? Remember, we are at that point where we're transitioning from the 844 system to the competence-based curriculum. What exactly bedevils our students today? And the reports that have been seen the other day, I mean a couple of them that speak of students who have gone to a level where you can really not quite tell what is probably instigating this animosity, instigating this level of indisciplines that they tend to have. Is it something that comes from home? Is it something that comes from the school environment? And that's exactly what we'll be discussing this morning as we get to understand what could be the solutions to this and just how best can the government address this. And looking at this particular story that has been captured on the papers, and also we've had that, I think that was one of our first stories yesterday night on the bulletin. And Kinoti cautions unruly students as detectives launch a crackdown. It becomes a little bit tough, and well, the authorities have been forced also to be a bit tight on the students. And this morning we ask the gurus whether indeed that would be one of the ways that we can seek to get a solution in regards to this particular scenario. So it is going to be an interesting conversation, and I'd love for you to be part and parcel of this. It's always good. The hashtag is Morning Cafe at Linda_Alela at TV47KE. The Twitter handles, the SMS short code running down on your screen, and equally the numbers to call. You can call us live and give us your view on what is happening. And you've witnessed what has happened across, students burning schools, some of them being, are violent on their own teachers, on their fellow students, and it leaves us at a point where we are indeed a worried lot. And so, joining me for the conversation is Mwalimu Ayub Mohamud. Yes, Mohamud is the word. Sometimes you can confuse that with Mohammed, who's the Deputy Principal, Jamhuri High School right here in Nairobi. And we'll also be having a software engineer, data scientist who focuses much on matters education. That is Robertson Kanyoro, who will be joining us via Skype to expound some more on this. The other time we had Robert, he, probably predicted this, and not really predicted this. This was based on a research that he had carried, and he says, we're headed to a year where we'll probably have a lot of indiscipline cases in schools, and probably would want to know, or you just want to understand deeper how they arrived at this as researchers and what this means and what needs to be done to address the same. Mwalimu, karibu sana.
Thank you.
It's always good to have such conversations that speak of how we can shape the future of our own students, shape the future of our own children. And these cases are on the rise. Is it because, well, it's a normal occurrence when it happens in one school and they probably watch this in news and then it triggers the same on the other one? Or what is happening?
Yeah, thank you, Linda. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I have a feeling that we need to ask ourselves, these students are from a long break.
Yes.
And we need to ask ourselves, what effect is this break having on the students' mindset?
Hold it right there. Before we even look at the break, in most cases, people would argue that, well, it's not the first time that it's happening. For instance, there was a scenario some times back, and we do not want to go back to history in Jamhuri. I'd want to believe that maybe at that particular time, Olimu too was there. And you'd realize that when it happens in Jamhuri, it happens in a different school, it happens in a different school. And even such, happens with, the ASON attacks that sometimes we see in our schools. So today, the students have torched, the students have burnt their classes, they've burnt the dormitories. Before you know it, the next school, the students have done the same. And so that is where we sit down and say, we need to establish what could be the cause of this. And true to it, it's been quite a long break, close to almost 11 months or so. That's a whole year wasted for most of the students. And so they have gotten to that point where they've literally forgotten everything to do with education. They've gotten to a point whereby, they are trying to accustom and adjust to what it is that, the school setup has to offer. And at a time when there's so much changes that are happening within the school, vicinity. And so this also could be in a huge way one of the key things that causes the pressure pressure for them to behave in irate ways. But one would want to ask, why is it that it has to go the negative way as opposed to it taking the positive direction? And one would want to ask, just what is the role of the parent, the home setup, the society, in terms of shaping up the behaviors of these particular students? What has gotten into them? Is there a need for psychological approach to addressing this? And so I come back to you, Mwalimu.
Yeah, thank you. I think you have alluded to issues of society and parenting and family setups and all that.
Yeah.
And I think we need to agree that the society has lost its moral compass. And these are issues even we see sometimes in the happening in the community. And students are also very good at aping what's happening in the community.
Yeah.
And that boils down also to issues of values. I think there was a time when parents were very good in transmitting values.
Yeah.
Our religious institutions were very strong enough to transmit values.
Yeah.
Even a lot of good values are in our cultures, and we can be able to borrow from them. But of late you find the family institution, the parenting, even our religious institutions. I think the only institution that is left to instill values is the institutions of learning. It's only schools where it's only teachers now who are left to instill those values. So I think it all boils down to parenting and mentorship. And the parent today is also very busy. That's why we're even finding social media has even taken up the role of parenting.
Right.
And we're even finding parents, instead of counseling students, sometimes you find even parents themselves require counseling, where students are sometimes abusing drugs, their parents are abusing drugs. So there's a lot of things wrong with our society.
Hold it right there. You've spoken about the teachers instilling these values, and honestly, having gone through the experience we've gone through, we all in unison agree that teachers are instrumental and they have played a huge role. But then before we even come to point fingers at the parents, just how crucial are some of these values that have been instilled at the school setup, that they can easily be eroded in a few months, in 11 months or so to speak?
I think you have to also appreciate the fact that the school is part of the community.
Yes.
And sometimes we cannot have only the school instilling values.
Yeah.
I think there should be perpetuation of those values even at the community level. So there's no way the school per se becomes a place where we instill values to these students.
Yeah.
And yet in the community we are having a different thing. So I think we should have a situation where the school and the community and the entire societal setup works hand in hand so that we can be able to instill these values. Otherwise it will look as if we instill it only in our institutions, but it's not happening outside the school compound.
All right. So some of these things that have been attributed to this scenario that we witnessed today are, well, technically what happens at the societal level and what happens at, the level of individuals and how they are raised and all that. But let's just look at the school setup where you sit in, where you are. And we probably just speak about the pressures that would probably come out of this setup that would trigger such heinous acts coming from students and such levels of indiscipline. I'd want to imagine that some of these acts we witness, a week into, opening of schools, and you find that a student has stabbed their teachers, a student has gone back home from school, and they have, they claim that they have murdered, family members and also, someone somewhere on the side. So it begs the question as to just what is there within the school setup that would probably bring this pressure, or what is there within the school setup that is not so good that most of the students or some of the students will find as though it's uncomfortable for them, and so they probably do something that is unexpected. Yeah,
thank you. You remember I said that we are living extraordinary times.
Yes.
And for the first time, these students are from a long break, and this could have an effect on their mindset. And we need to ask ourselves questions like, what is it that they were doing at home, which they miss? You remember these students were at home, there were no programs. Some of them could engage in drugs, others were in business, maybe they were touting, they were in border and all that. So you are coming from a scenario where there were no programs and there's all freedom, there's no counseling, and then you are coming to a school setup where there are programs set for you from, let's say, 8 to 5, and your freedom is curtailed. So I think all these can be a factor contributing to what is the anxiety to to the anxiety and all that. And then there's also anxiety in terms of change of academic, restructuring of the academic calendar, the lockdowns and all that. So I think there's a lot of anxiety within the students, and coupled with the long break which they have come from, and all this is having an effect on their on their mindset.
All right, when you stay with these students as parents and equally as teachers, there's always that tendency where you get to understand them proper, and you understand some of the things that would be of negative or positive effect to them. In the wisdom of the school setup, in the wisdom of the teachers, what do you suppose then should be done? Acknowledging the fact that yes, they've been away for a long break, acknowledging the fact that there's some level of changes in the school calendar, and we've also seen the incorporation of a competence-based curriculum where of course we closed down at a point when we're trying to incorporate this into the system and adapting this fully at those piloting stages. So what needs to be done then to at least create a remedy, if not long term then at least short term, to be able to address this?
Yeah, thank you. I think it still boils down on the teacher. Yeah. And you also realize the teacher also has to work hand in hand in terms of providing psychosocial support, not only from the school, even from the home. And this is where the school works closely with the parents.
Okay.
And I'm looking at a scenario where students are supported. Students are supported to have that psychosocial support. But again, we find teachers may be overwhelmed, teachers ill-equipped.
Yes.
And I think there's a need to have maybe professionals who can be able to provide that psychosocial support in a very professional way, considering that teachers are overwhelmed by the teaching of the curriculum subjects.
Okay.
And sometimes you might even find the issues of mental health, and a teacher might even see it as an indiscipline. So I think there's need to have that professional approach. Yeah, professional approach, and have maybe counselors, professional counselors, and so that these students, these issues can be able to be addressed.
Okay, well, and do you suppose indeed that that psychological approach, that counseling approach would come in handy to address this?
A lot.
And save this, the ugly scenario that would probably be, something that we'd probably witness in future?
A lot, because you even find some of these students come from dysfunctional families.
Yes.
Disjointed families. And they have a lot of issues even before they come to do their academic work.
Okay.
So I think it will go a long way in ensuring that these students' needs and their anxiety and all that is addressed without just leaving it to the teacher.
All right.
People expect a lot from the teacher, but sometimes the teacher is also a human being, and at some point even the same teacher requires also sometimes psychosocial support.
It's true. Yeah. Well, okay, and it's equally important that we look at the research perspective or the research angle and also the data collection angle in terms of some of scenarios that we have witnessed today, and whether they have worked in the past and how they have been addressed in the past and how bad they've been. And joining us via Skype is a software engineer, data scientist who's focused much on research also. And at a point when schools closed down, he traversed different parts of the country to do research or to conduct a research and on what would be the likelihoods of having a stable school setup, educational setup at a point when we'll have our students back to school. The other time I had him on set, we're looking at this research and an overview of what it would mean getting students back to school and how they're going to adapt to that. And from his research, he argued that, well, there are likelihoods that we're going to witness a huge level of unrest in schools. And this is what we are saying. We cross fingers that it does not go to another level. But then I would just want to understand how instrumental research is and how instrumental data is for us to be able first to identify the likelihoods of a problem occurring, and how best we can be able to have solutions to this particular problem. So, Robert Kanyoro joins us via Skype. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, Neil.
Good to have you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, the instrument of data collection, pretty crucial, as you had rightfully pointed it, on our previous session. And here we are today. We are speaking of what it is that the research you conducted projected. What would you say of it?
Well, thank you so much. And as I told you last time, the data that we collected and the predictions that we made, we were actually not advocating. We were not encouraging a situation where strikes would happen, but we were actually predicting that there would be possibility of strikes this year.
Yes.
And we have actually started seeing a series of this. And we pray that we are not going to have a repeat of 2008. If you remember around 2008 and 2009, we had a lot of unrest in schools. And what have just started might escalate to what we had in 2008 and 2009. And we don't want to go back there. So it's a very good conversation, and we need to have a way forward to curb this. So the data was able to predict that actually this is what is going to happen because of how the students have been at home and all the other informations that we collected. But it is not late. We are not late. We can curb this.
And just how can we do this? We have been people who, evidently depend on research to determine what it is that will take as a solution to certain problems. And even, looking at what has happened previously, and I'm glad that you mentioned the 2007-2008 post-election violence, and here we are coming to a pandemic. And, it's probably not the last time that we're going to experience, such a level of, issues that will crop up and in a way distract the school calendar. What would be some of the lessons that we need to pick out of, the research that you have conducted, so that in the event that we are bedeviled with the same, then we are able to approach it differently in a better way in comparison to how we have approached it, previously?
As I pointed earlier, the issues of school strikes are not going to be to be informed or to be caused by just one factor. There are so many other factors that are being involved here. And my suggestion is that we solve an issue at a time. Or rather, if it is an issue, like the teacher has said, if it is the issue of drug abuse, can we solve it individually? Then if it is an issue of maybe teachers having not been paid, can we solve that individually? So there are so many factors that are being involved here. And the main stakeholder here is the teacher, like our teacher has just said. And there are so many things that the teachers need to do at this time. One of the things is that I can tell you for sure that there is social media, and so many students went to schools with phones. And it is upon the teachers now and the parents to actually know, where did my child leave the phone when he was going back to school? Because these students have the phones at school and they are communicating. As I was talking about 2008 and 2009, I was not talking about the post-election violence, I was talking about strikes. If you can go back to history, you are going to find in 2008, there was a lot of strikes in schools. Almost 70 schools got burnt in 2008. Yeah. And we don't want to go back there. So what was the main issue that accelerated the issues of strike that time? It was communication. So right now, as we speak, students are being informed by the others that our strikes we are planning a strike in our school. Others are being told through social media that certain schools have striked. So if you are able to curb communication fast at this time, then we can curb more strikes that are coming to come.
All right. Well, one of the key reasons, or maybe I have a couple of reasons as to why some of the students would get to that point where, there's so much unrest and, the levels of indiscipline, shoot up. And within the school setup, Mwalimu, there's one key one that has been highlighted, a couple of them: harsh school rules and regulations and conducive school environment, poor leadership of some school administrators, lack of extracurricular activities. There are others listed downwards, but I would want for us to pick this particular one. And understanding where we're coming from, the COVID-19 scenario, the government equally deemed it necessary, to cuts on the extracurricular activities. This in a bid to try and level and stop, the curb or the spread of COVID-19, or to curb the spread of COVID-19. In a way, many have looked at this as, stress relievers. It eases pressures in the children. It makes them loosen up from the usual formal and tough times. There are other things that have been introduced, have been incorporated in the system right now to try and help the students release the pressure, who come with so much pressure, having been, at ease and enjoying their moments back at home.
Yeah, that's why I was saying we are living extraordinary times.
Yes.
And that alone can also make students have a lot of pressure.
And are these students really well, endowed with information to understand and to internalize that and to accept that indeed these are extraordinary moments?
It's tough times, and they are aware.
Yes.
But I think once in a while they also play those indoor games, like badminton and all that. But I think it's a very important point, and the fact that they are not playing and their mindsets are only on books and all that can also be a very big factor in terms of exerting a lot of pressure on them, and they don't have a place to release their negative energy. All
right, and the societal based factors also are very crucial. I would want to assume or believe that at the point of collection, of this data and the research that is being conducted, what is key is probably understanding what could be the causes, or that would trigger, troubleshoot and get to understand what would trigger students to go out there and strike, what would trigger students to go out there and be discipline, what would trigger students to go out there and do things that are extraordinarily terrible for that matter. So when we speak about the societal factors that would probably be instrumental in pushing for this, what are some of them that you probably have noted in your day-to-day activity, in your movement for matters research across the different parts of the country? And do you suppose in such a scenario that we speak of today, this could have been instrumental more than these ones that are caused at the school setup?
Now, last time I talked about students having pressure, and we were looking at ways in which we can try to ease the pressure of these students. And I talked about having motivation speakers in schools. If you can go back to the time that you were in high school, you can remember the aftermath of having a motivation speaker in school. What usually used to happen, students used to change. Even if it used to take for a month or so, at least they used to there's some pressure that used to be pulled out of these students.
But just how good is this? How good is this before you proceed in terms of getting long-term solutions? And I agree with you. I mean, I have been through that experience where this motivational speaker comes and they speak to you, and you feel like it has sunk deep into your heart. But before you know it, a month later, you have lost all the lessons that you picked at this particular point. So how instrumental is it when we are all out here trying to seek to get long-term solutions?
Yes. One thing we should know is that we are dealing with children. We are dealing with teenagers, and we don't stay in the teenage that age forever. So it's a short term. We need, instead of long term, we need first to deal with the short term solutions. So if you are able to solve this issue of strike, for instance, for now, by the time these guys are out of their teenage era, they're not going to be thinking about strikes again. They're going to be out there thinking about other things. So it's not a long-term issue, but the society and the government have a way, or have a need to have a platform where we need to have long-term solutions. For instance, the government can have an arm of the government, or in the Ministry of Education, that specifically deals with this. For instance, right now we are talking, the government doesn't have an arm that deals with strikes, for instance. We only have the cabinet secretary and the CSS and the management of education, but we don't have a special arm that actually deals with schools unrest. So I wish the government could come up with such an arm that is able to deal with schools unrest, and that can be a long-term solution for this problem.
Well, that one probably would bring me to this point, and that question that was given by the DCI in regards to how they can deal with this, and a stern warning to the students who are unruly, and also saying that if you do something that is bad today, whether you're in class 1 or 2, you will go with this record until the end of time. And so that means this record can come in handy to either determine whether you take a positive direction in life or a negative direction in life. Do you suppose it's a little bit too stern, or it is necessary, Mwalimu?
Yeah, it's very important, and not only for students, but for even for any other citizen.
Yeah.
But it's a good measure, and the students are aware. We normally tell them, and they are very much aware on this issue of whatever crime they commit is going to reflect in their certificate of good conduct. But I think we also need to see these students as these are not students, these are criminals.
Right.
And I think at some point we need to have arrests, the way my colleague has alluded to. We need to see arrests and convictions, and not these students not treated as students, but as treated as criminals.
Okay.
Yeah, and the security agencies swinging to action.
Okay. Well, what does this then do to the student? And some of them would tell you, if by default you are caught in something that would be considered as unruly, whether you wanted it or not, and then you have this criminal record, or you have this record that paints you as a bad character, one would then argue that most of the students would probably say, well, after all, what is the point of proceeding with education? What is the point of taking it to the next level if already I have a record that speaks of a negative individual? Would it be a little bit too radical to instigate or to incorporate this as early as now, or as early as for the students who are on the lower primaries and all?
It's important.
I think it will work. Let me give an example with myself. In 2010, I finished my Form 4 in 2010.
Yes.
And my exam was cancelled because of irregularities. That time the cabinet secretary was Dr. Sam Ogeri. Now, that time the government brought an issue and brought a regulation that if your exam is cancelled, you're supposed to stay outside for 2 years before you join school.
Yes.
So I had to stay outside in 2011 and 2012. So I went back to Form 4 in 2012. So I went back to Form 4 again. Now, that time in 2012, I could not try to have any irregularity. Our exams were cancelled because we had phones in schools.
Okay.
Now, I think it worked for my case. And that such tough decisions by the government will definitely work, because when I went back in 2012, I never want. In fact, I was in the front line to tell the other students that you're not supposed to have irregularities. I was guiding them that there will be consequences if you have irregularities. But at the end, I was able to still get my good grade of an A. But I think that will work.
All right. Well, that's incredible. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was saying it is equally important for us to give that kind of guidance or that kind of directive from the DCI. But we're also saying that does not also stop us from those students, because some of these students, they might also be committing crimes even in the community, and they come back to school to do the same crimes. And I think it's the high time we treat them as criminals, and we convict and we arrest them. Yeah, maybe sometimes it takes 2 or 3 students to ban a dormitory. It might not be the whole school.
Right.
And I think it's important we deal with them, and we arrest them so that the other students are protected.
All right, as we get to a close, generational disparities and the kinds of movies that we watch out here, the kind of information that the students have access to, is one thing that is almost becoming hard to regulate or to address. Just how best can we in equal measures appreciate what technology comes along with, what different generations come along with, but in equal measure also ensure that it does not come in to probably alter or get our students to levels where they are indisciplined, levels where they are not acceptable, or they have characters that are not acceptable in society?
We are living in a time when technology is messing up our children. Right now, we have a lot of issues of pornography, a lot of different movies. We have Netflix. We have so many sites. We have torrents, and so many sites in the dark web where students are and our children are getting bad information from.
Yes.
So. To me, this is a responsibility of the government. You know, the government, like you had in Uganda, was able to shut down the internet and even the social media. The government has the power to actually have a firewall that is able to actually restrict our children from accessing all this information. The government have the power to even get a firewall or block all sites like pornographic sites. The government has the power to do that. So I think this is an issue of the government to put in regulations for what our children are watching, to what our children are accessing. We have mobile service providers like Safaricom and others. They have a great responsibility to get to know what gets information gets to these kids. Now, in the near future, every kid will be having mobile phones, but whatever they are watching, whatever they are accessing, we cannot control. You cannot control as a parent. You cannot control as a teacher. But I think the government, which has more power, can actually control what information is being accessed by this. Having said that, we still have, as parents and as even the religious leaders, to actually teach our children on these issues. The issues of pornography, the issues of these movies, the issues of the information they are accessing in the internet. We still have a long way to teach our children, because there is a gap of technology between our parents and us. And if we are not taught, then we are going to mess up.
All right, well, and Sylvester Kimemia drops a message here, says the essence of the matter is to moderate the COVID-19 protocols in the new normal. Do not overdo the protocols. I don't know whether we are overdoing it. Mwalimu will tell us that, but he also says it is the high time schools introduced full-time chaplains and counselors. We don't have those ones in schools today?
Yeah, but I think there's a program by government to introduce the chaplains. And
yes.
I think chaplains is a way forward in terms of instilling these values, which maybe they are missing at home. And there's a very big role chaplaincy can play.
Yeah.
And I think it's something ministry has been grappling with for a very long time. But I think it's something that is being worked out.
Okay.
And this issue of psychosocial support, issues of counseling, issues of, I think all these issues will be handled once we have the chaplaincy in place. And then also, just to add on issue of technology, we live in a digital era.
Yes.
And there's a tendency for the generation today, they are different from the generations that were there way back. So generation today is very creative. And there's a way sometimes they watch movies on violence, and sometimes they have a tendency maybe to ape the same.
Yes.
And I think this is what we are also experiencing in our schools. But I think technology is a double-edged sword. There's a way we can be able to teach even about lessons on non-violence,
yes.
social media literacy and all that, and give lessons on maybe de-escalation approaches and all that. So I think internet is not bad per se, but we can be able to mentor them in such a way that they make use of social media and even the internet in a productive way.
Well, indeed. And before we close it, I'd probably want to ask you, how then do we redefine teaching and make it an engine to drive, positivity, to drive change, to drive, something that is going to culminate to boosting the economy, and generally, to ensure that the well-being of a student is something that we realize and we witness?
Yeah, it's about looking at the child as an all-round person.
Okay.
And the values I've talked about, a child not only has the skills and the knowledge, but also a child with a character and the ethics, and a child who is tolerant, a child who is patriotic, a child who is creative, a child with critical thinking, a child all-round.
Yes.
And I think when a child has all those qualities, than a child who is a job creator, not a job seeker. I think when we bring out a child as an all-round person, then there's a lot we can do in terms of supporting the economy.
Okay, well, Robert, as we come to a close, the instrument of data collection, they say, is important in curbing these vices. Just how can it be put to use? How can it be embraced so at least it offers, that service that is highly required, especially at such a time?
So we are living in a data age where everything, business, politics, everything is data driven. That's the age we are living at. Now, we can actually predict what will happen with data in almost all areas in our society, from politics, business, even in our schools. So I did this experiment by collecting the data from all these schools and actually predicting what will happen this year. And if such a tool is used, and I'll make it public, where even the schools themselves can actually predict the trends of these students, we can actually be in a good place. Now, look at this scenario where a student has been performing very well in Form 1, he had a B plane. In Form 2, he went and had a B+. In Form 3, that student goes and gets a C grade and a C- and go that. Then you can actually look at the trend of these students and actually be able to know that something has actually changed in the life of these students. So that's how generally we use data to actually predict and detect something is a mess or something is amiss in someone's life. And we can actually use this even to predict what will happen to our schools, and we will continue predicting this and helping our students and schools to curb this unrest.
All right, well, thank you so much, gentlemen. I am Mohammed, Deputy Principal, Jamhuri High School, and also at some point in time, the holder of one of the best global prize for the teachers. You did so well, especially in the kind of environment, and in most cases, then you were in Eastleigh Boys, yeah?
Yep,
and it looked like it was a very tough, ground, especially with the kind of radicalization that is witnessed, with the kind of, exposure that the youth have out there to negativities in the society. You probably did well and were instrumental towards making that change and shifting the minds. And I think a child's brain is pretty much easy. You can easily shift them from this point of negativity to this point of positivity, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I am Mohammed Mwalimu, and of course, thank you so much, Robert Kanyori, who's a software engineer and a data scientist. It was good having you this morning. And we certainly hope that we're going to have more and more of these conversations as we strive to get solutions to what would be the problems that bedevil our students. It is incumbent upon us to take charge. And if we take charge, we'll certainly be able to handle and avoid some of these vices playing out in our respective schools. And that's why we close it on Morning Cafe this morning, as we hope for a better day tomorrow. Thank you so much, and I wish you nothing but the best. My name is Linda Alela. Thank you so much, Mwalimu. Thank you so much, Robert.